section, where we have presentations of innovative solutions for unlocking the potential of SMEs for SDGs. Today we have with us Mr. Greg Griffiths, who is the chairman and founder of YouCrowdMe UK Limited and founder of Innovate for Life. He is a passionate entrepreneur who has worked with many startups, created a few, but laser focused on his current mission. As the founder of YouCrowdMe and founder of Innovate for Life, he strives to build communities, networks, and help global companies with their innovation, digital transformation needs, and how it can be applied within their business. He has been responsible for bringing on board many well-known global Fortune brands, companies, organizations, and NGOs. He has worked very closely with senior leadership teams from CEO to transformation specialists, strategy experts, and innovation gurus. His goal is to help align strategy and business goals against much needed tangible needs and results. He has worked in the software and ICT space since coming to Australia in May 2004 and has been instrumental in winning, delivering, and being part of incredible teams that have brought on board some of the biggest Fortune deals in Asia Pacific. Let me proudly present before you Chairman, CEO, and founder, YouCrowdMe UK Limited, Mr. Greg Griffiths. Over to you, Mr. Greg.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for the very kind introduction, Aparna. I'm personally very proud to support you guys and be a part of this. And I'd like to firstly thank the Global Council for the promotion of international trade, aka GCPIT, for this great opportunity, honor, and privilege to speak at the SDGs Global Impact Startup event. This incredible event is really here to, in my opinion, better support and help the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which are, broadly marketed. They're on their website, and I think it's a really urgent call for action by all countries, to be honest, developed and non-developed, in a global partnership, working as one. So let's get started. I'll talk more about the many challenges that SMEs currently face, then move on to a more positive note, and how leveraging innovation or innovative solutions can significantly benefit SMEs. So for me, the ultimate success is a more connected, collaborative ecosystem that truly supports and benefits, again, back to the United Nations. They're the overarching global body and truly supports their 17 mandated Sustainable Development Goals. So first up, I really wanted to share some astonishing facts about SMEs. Some of you may know these facts, some of you may not, but I think it's really important to really sort of set the stage and just understand how important they are and the impact they have globally. So SMEs account for 95% plus of all global businesses, which translates into approximately 400 million companies, plus or minus. So that's a lot of companies. Fact number two, SMEs account for approximately 60 to 70% of all global employees, which means they're the main source of job creation globally. It's not the large Fortune companies, it's not the large enterprise companies. It really is SME companies, including startups and other entrepreneurs. Fact number three, SMEs represent approximately 99% of all EU, European Union businesses, and they create around 85% of all new jobs, which is astounding, and provide 2/3 of the total private sector employment. Just those three facts alone, I think people sort of underestimate SMEs and their place within the global landscape. So I think it's fair to say that SMEs are not only the most important type of business or company globally, but they're potentially also the most at risk. Here's why, from my perspective, from my lens. The majority of SMEs all share very similar challenges, like many companies or startups, but SMEs in particular. When they're trying to grow, when they're trying to be more innovative, when they're trying to manage cash flow, when they're trying to get funding either from the bank or from VCs or other, financial avenues, especially right now in COVID. It's a very tough ask from any SME, regardless of how good you know the bank manager or how successful your past is. Everything is viewed in a very different landscape right now. And so each SME will use or follow different strategies to help them best address some of the above challenges I just mentioned. However, these are typically focused on one or two at a time when commercially feasible. And what I mean by that is they don't have the luxury of just saying, we're going to fix this. We have the money, we're going to go and sort this out. We're going to go and hire someone, we're going to fix this. They don't have that luxury. And so their biggest threat really is they're hamstrung pretty much in many areas of their business. Their biggest threats or problems that they encounter on a daily basis, in my opinion, is really down to three key things. And these three key things have been documented by professors, adjunct professors, VCs, anyone who's who within this space. There are many others, and we're not here to talk about all of them, but from my opinion, I think the number one reason why SMEs face the challenges they do is really, one, the lack of funding, especially in this environment or this climate. Two, the lack of expertise, the resources or the training within their company. Three, the lack of access to innovation or consumer insight type tools that can help drive new ideas for their business. So if we look at the lack of funding, and I have quoted a few different other organizations here who have more resources than myself to provide this research. If we look at the research from the World Bank, access to finance is really the key constraint to SME growth globally. And I think most people know that, but I think it's also important to highlight that as the number one reason why SMEs can't grow. It's the second most cited obstacle facing SME growth within their businesses in emerging markets, but also developing countries. I have provided links on this speech, which I'm happy to share afterwards. For those of you that want to, read 200 pages worth of statistics or analysis, it's all there for you. But then it becomes even harder for SMEs when your business is not part of the top 5 fastest growing industries by revenue spend or investment. And so these top 5 are healthcare, transportation, financial services, artificial intelligence, and e-commerce. So if you're not part of that top 5 right now here today, then the chance of you getting the funding you're after is reduced dramatically. So that again creates a big problem for global SMEs that have a brilliant idea, have a great team, a great product, have a vision to change the world. It does impact how SMEs can operate in today's day and age. The next thing that sort of forms underneath that very well is building revenue takes time. Well, of course, because if you don't have finance, you can't build a product. So then how can you demonstrate revenue? So for most companies, statistically, it takes about 2 years. 2 years to become profitable, which is why finding investors is not only one of the top priorities for SMEs and startups, it's also the biggest focus of the company, from the CEO to the founders, the directors, and the board. So you have someone with a brilliant idea who wants to change the world, yet their main focus is trying to raise funds. So it's very counterintuitive if you look at it from that respect. And so how do they survive? How do they move through this very much, in my opinion, a gray area? These companies will borrow money from friends and family, which is kind of standard. They will get loans. They might look at crowdfunding as a particular option. They might look at other micro investment services, and there's a few out there which are very good. Or they might reach out to investment firms. But the reality of the Silicon Valley VC investment is approximately 0.05%. of SMEs or startups getting funded. So it's a very, very low percentage. But at the same time, it's a lot of your resources and time invested, especially the energy, which you need as a business, in the wrong places. And so again, I don't want to keep using COVID as an excuse, but unfortunately, it has been around for 2 years, or bordering on 2 years. And I think the reality is it will continue until the world adopts it, like the flu or other things like that. And so I think the business landscape needs to change with the times on how it actually impacts these companies. So if I look at the next thing, which I believe is something which is really important, is the lack of expertise, the lack of resources, and the lack of training. There's a lot of companies out there that can sell you, the Golden Globe or the Oscar within each of these 3 key elements. But the reality is most SMEs can't afford these. SMEs, from my experience, have quite a lonely environment where money is very tight. Money dictates many things, and so not being able to hire the best talent or find the right experts, it has a huge impact on their growth. And not having those resources also impacts the ability to execute against the company's business strategy, vision, and goals. So automatically there's doubt in the back of the SME CEO or founder or directors, knowing that only a few things that they can do, which leads me on to my next part. And so the reality is SMEs can't afford to implement, run, and manage innovation or idea programs or customer insights on a platform, whether that's SaaS-based, custom, manual, or something developed internally. And so when you look at what it takes to actually manage an idea platform or an innovation program, or any of these really cool available technologies in the digital space, you need resources, you need administrators, you need people that are gifted and talented with design, you need people in the marketing space. There's an endless list of, nice to haves, but the reality is most of these companies don't have that. They have their salesperson, they have maybe a marketing person, they have their finance / legal person. Everyone is in a very much of a hybrid role within the SME until they sign their big first order. That may be, $100,000 or $1 million or whatever the number may be. Then they can sort of, rest on their laurels for a fraction of a moment before they figure out they now need to find the next $1 million. And so it's an ongoing process of SMEs really reinventing themselves on a daily or weekly basis to find revenue either from customers or from financial investments. So the barrier to entry, in my opinion, for SMEs to take on board these types of innovation or digital technology tools, it's unfortunately too high. It's kind of, you look at large Fortune companies, which I've worked with in the past, they have huge teams, huge resources, huge budgets. And for them, that's kind of like, the norm. So, how could SMEs compete more effectively with these larger organizations or competitors? So if I look at the lack of access to innovation platforms or consumer insights for SME companies, I just wanted to list down a few of what I think are some of the barriers for these companies and how they can be overcome. So if we break down the process of ideation or innovation or consumer insights, it's a global thing. It's a global challenge. It's not something which is just for Fortune companies or enterprise companies. Everyone has ideas at the end of the day. You know, the majority of ideas actually happen in the shower, funnily enough, and you know that is a widely agreed consensus. But ideas invariably happen at a local, sectorial, or product-specific level. Global generated ideas are random in form. And one thing which I haven't included in the speech tonight is again, another consensus from how many raw ideas or conceptual ideas does it take to actually create a commercial success? And the answer is 3,000. And so if I look at 3,000 ideas to create a commercial success, which they deem as $100 million US plus or minus, or sometimes $1 billion, how does an SME get to find 3,000 ideas in the first place? Like, it's pretty much impossible. And so, you know, without going into the technology aspect and just a pure business aspect, again, these barriers are really, really difficult for SME companies. And so the whole David and Goliath, you know, historical sort of humor really sort of plays into context here, because they really can't compete against larger organizations. And so SMEs really have to be, you know, a lot more nimble, a lot smarter, a lot more fiscal, and be out there looking for how they can communicate with, you know, the ecosystem that they live in, either on a local basis or on an industry basis. And that has to be global. It can't be local. I think, you know, the best businesses should have a global local approach. You know, never forget where you're from and what you do and what's important to your mission and your values, but you have to have a global mindset in today's day and age. And so if I look at the marketing effort that's required in general, or niche targeting, you can't have a scattergun approach. You know, this is very much asymmetric to how ideas are generated. Having existing and strong customer bases can also work against you. You know, it can also be inappropriate for you to go to your customers and say, well, what do you think of this new product? And so it's very much a balancing act between working with your customers, your partners, your employees. If you have mentors, great. It is a fine line. So again, SMEs are continuously facing these challenges as they try and reinvent themselves, as they try and be more innovative, disruptive, competitive. And then, you know, even if you do get to that point where you have customer groups or focus groups, you know, it's very time consuming. It's time consuming, taking you away from your business. It's also expensive. And 9 times out of 10, there's very unreliable results because you're doing this for the first time. So these are some of the barriers I believe have a huge impact on the global economy. And it's really because not enough of the right ideas are being put forward to the right organizations, and the organizations themselves are not focused on delivering the right ideas to the consumer or the customer. And this is very apparent. This is very apparent if you look at any research. I think Clayton Christensen, who's like the innovation godfather, who unfortunately passed a few years ago, you know, 90 to 95% of all new products fail. And I find this number astonishing, considering most of this failure rate is associated with the larger Fortune enterprise companies. And so here we are spending billions of dollars as a large company, as a large Fortune enterprise. Tools. You know, these global organizations aren't keeping up with their customers' wants. And it's very simple. And I think this is a great opportunity for SMEs to really harness on their customer base, whether internal or external, talking with their partners, to really identify what it is that's important to them. And so until these dynamics change, we'll keep seeing these failure rates, not just at the Fortune enterprise level, but also at the SME level. We need to change the mindset of how we communicate with our customers. We need to listen. I think listening is the most important tool, given it's there, it's for free, but most companies don't do that. And so until these changes happen, I think there's going to continue to be such a large number of startups and SMEs that really fail in these large numbers. And so if I had a magic wand and I said to SMEs today, what type of technology and tools am I confident with that could potentially address some of the challenges that we've discussed, or at least address them, better them, reduce the analysis or the statistics around how can we go to market at 80% versus 70%, tangible, quantifiable measurements. So one example, which has been around for a very long time, is surveys. And I'm sure we've all heard of SurveyMonkey and other platforms out there. I'm not plugging them, by the way. I actually find their product to be too one-sided, which comes into my point here. So surveys have been around for a very long time. Typically, they're there to engage the customer, and they're there to provide much needed valuable insights for the company. And those insights could be operational, product, marketing, sales, and so forth. The problem with the traditional current format for surveys, and I think this stands the ground, is most surveys are not relevant to ethnic groups. And again, I can't mention names, but if a survey goes out from a large Fortune enterprise company or SME, they wouldn't necessarily have the information or knowledge of who their customers are. And so the messaging would go out to the entire group about taking on board who they are. They are expensive, not just from a cost perspective, but also from an internal resource cost perspective. It's also very limiting because in Australia or in the UK, as far as I know, when you use focus groups to run surveys around either product or feedback and so forth, they don't actually have to go out to the whole of London or the whole of Sydney. They take a very small percentage, they re-weight it and calculate it, and then they provide an overall 70% of customers are happy with this brand, when the reality is they haven't spoken to 70% of their customers. And so there's a lot of incorrect modeling and assumptions that actually skew the truth. And so as a consumer, as a customer of an SME, there's no real incentive or appeal to me, especially with the effort that I need to give you, and then start providing more personal information, which the likes of Facebook and others already have. And so it kind of, it comes back to the what's in it for me. Why should I give you my ideas, my thoughts, my feedback, when the reality is, my voice is not being heard and it's not being actioned? And so, these are some of the critical challenges which, happen for SMEs. And product development is another one. It ties in very nicely with product failure rates. But the reality is for SME companies, they only have maybe one or two people that are actually either part-time or full-time in this role. And so they don't necessarily have the time or the resources or potentially the expertise to actually take this idea to the next level. There's always a lack of communication or coordination between departments. Who's responsible for taking this idea to market? Who has the budget? Who gets the glory? Look at me, I'm in the public arena, I created this. There's a lot of mixed messaging happening, and it's very difficult for a small company to manage this process. And so, when you look at the marketing teams that are part of this, they really need to know from the get-go, what are the results that they're expecting, and can they be, quantified in a tangible format? I will make a quote here from Edelman. Edelman's been around for a long time. I really like their trust barometer personally. And this talks about the employee experience. And I think this ties in nicely with the conversation we're having tonight. Because if you have happy employees, guess what? They're not going to leave in general. The cost to the SME company to replace these employees is huge. It's not often spoken about, but the reality is there's 3 to 6 months of training the new person. There's the new person bonding with their new team. There's all these other variables that aren't really taken into consideration. And so when you're talking about employee trust, that to me personally has a very significant value add to the bottom line of any company, especially SMEs. And so the Edelman quote I'm talking about here is 78% say a company who treats its employees is one of the best indicators of its trustworthiness. And I mentioned, why am I talking about trust in the context of lack of access to technology? Well, very simple. If SMEs have the right tools in the first place to engage more effectively with their employees, not just their customers, the likelihood of them leaving is drastically reduced. Engaged employees will go above and beyond. They will give you your ideas, they will give you your insights, as long as there is a what's in it for me, or what I like to call a motivation, or some form of gamification, whereby I do get rewarded for my own personal IP, which is not necessarily part of your contract, by the way. People will give you ideas all the time. You know, everyone has ideas, but again, there has to be that sort of mutual understanding of, well, why am I going to give you my IP when maybe it might be the next, Apple, or the next, Alibaba, or the next, unicorn. So this is really important to understand, and understand your employees well. So for the fun part, I've spoken a bit about the challenges SMEs face. I've spoken about a few key areas that might be sort of negatively viewed, but the fun part is how innovative solutions and technology can change those dynamics and the doubt within companies. There is hope. There is a future for how SMEs can engage differently, and I think this is really important. I can't necessarily mention a particular company or companies, but SMEs today have a far greater choice of technology solutions for them to engage the customer, whether the customer is the employee or a consumer, or their partners, or other user types that they would categorize. And so there's many variables in which SMEs can go down this path. Personally, I think they need to understand what they're trying to achieve in the first place. Are they lacking in marketing? Are they lacking in product? Are they lacking in the sales? And maybe it's all of the above, but you need to have a realistic expectation of, if I sign up to this whiz-bang ideas management platform, what will I get from that? What will the user experience be like for my customer? If I go ahead and spend, $10,000 or $100,000 and the customer doesn't like it, and I'm not getting the data or the quantifiable information that I was expecting, then that could make or break your company. It's as simple as that. So there are websites out there which I have listed in the speech. Capterra would be a good one that you could go to. They have some pretty good information around the research and statistics of software companies. Other ones that would be really good as well would be G2. G2 is pretty reliable, and Trust Radius. So those are the three websites I would recommend going to get some better understanding of the types of software available to SMEs. From an innovation and consumer insights platform perspective, I've included this selfishly because I personally believe that the greatest opportunity for SME companies is through ideation. I spent a lot of time in this space. And at the end of the day, companies need ideas to survive. That's just a simple, non-negotiable conversation. Companies need customers. Go figure. Companies need to be future-proofed. That's the long game. How do we get to the long game? companies need to be doing things very, very differently than what they were doing last year, 5 years ago, or 10 years ago. And the list goes on. And fortunately or unfortunately, I don't have the time to do this with you tonight, and I'm sure there'll be some very mixed opinions on that. But the reality is, in my opinion, any company, and we're talking about SMEs, a lot of the problems that they have, there are answers and solutions all around them. And I think the challenge is the mindset. Technology is absolutely a component to this. They've all got employees, they've all got customers, they've all got partners and members or volunteers or friends and family. Each of these user types has their own ecosystem. And so whether it's getting new customers, then you would focus on your most loyal user type. If it means how do we operationalize a particular part of the business, you have your employees, but also you have your customers and your partners, and you could talk to them about what are they doing? What are they doing to better their business, either from a technical perspective or operational perspective? And I think what most companies don't like doing is actually asking for help. I think a lot of these companies are too proud. Most companies do not like asking for referrals from a sales and marketing perspective. Most customers would love to talk about how amazing, company X is, how much money they've saved them. I think that's part of the mindset, and I don't think it's a Western world mindset. I think that's a global mindset. And from these user types, with social media and digital pretty much the focus of the next 20 years, and yes, you can put in AI and blockchain. All of these users have social media accounts. All of these social media accounts is a license to print money to a degree, with respect and humility around how can we get out to new customers as an SME? Are we talking to our friends and family in social media accounts? And I don't think they are, personally. I think they're very much set on a mindset of, we have a marketing person, we have a marketing team, they'll do marketing things without necessarily factoring in a very dynamic and disruptive landscape with COVID right now, unfortunately. And so, I look at that as a great opportunity to create free marketing, free referrals, and really try and build that partner ecosystem. I think that's really important for SMEs who do feel alone. So just some stats around crowdsourcing or innovation or idea sourcing. And I won't bore you with these, but typically idea sourcing or innovation management is focused internally. And that would be approximately 90% of most companies, where they would throw out a campaign supported by a problem statement or a pain point. Could be operational, it could be employee experience, customer experience, whatever it may be. They go to a crowd of their users, their employees, and they ask for feedback. And some of these software platforms, which you can see on the websites I mentioned, they use AI, they use automation, they use other algorithms, and they can help you go from many to few ideas through a very much structured process. And this is why I wanted you to talk more about the innovation component to this, because as a small company, you don't have the time, energy, or money to be trying to find these types of solutions. Those solutions are there already for you. You just need to embrace them, run with the campaign. Most of these vendors will do pilots or proof of concepts. And worst case, you are now, I wouldn't say an expert, but you are now fully across what an innovation platform or tool can do for your business, whether it works for you or not. The point is, as an SME, you have to be challenging yourself. You have to be looking at new technology solutions, whether it's innovation or consumer insights or some of these hybrid models that are in market at the moment. And so, my advice to any SME is, if there is a new technology platform, and we can talk about blockchain, we can talk about NFTs, they all have a purpose right now here today. Blockchain for me is pretty much indisputable provenance. It is ownership that has an audit trail, version history, version control. So there are lots of different things that SMEs can do. I think education is probably a big component. And I speak about accelerators. I think accelerators are probably one of the most undervalued resources that any company has. They are typically for startups, but there has been a huge swing from just focusing on startups to smaller companies that don't necessarily have the expertise like some of the professors do, or previous entrepreneurs, or successful business people. And so in that environment, they learn best practice. They learn how to deal with very stressful, challenging times. They learn how to manage their cash flow better. They learn how to put in place the more appropriate HR process and practices. So education for me would be definitely something which SME companies should be looking for.
Great. Thank you so much, Greg, for that wonderful session. And as you said, many of the SMEs don't have the luxury to fix many of their problems because of the lack of funding, right? Especially during this COVID time. Thank you for telling us that there is hope, and at the same time giving solutions also to SMEs to focus on.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having myself and who we represent at UCrowdMe, and we'd like to do a lot more with you and your organization. And we feel it's really important that what you're doing to support the overarching United Nations 17 key steps or sustainable development goals is something that we'd love to be a part of. So again, I really thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.